All right, let's dive right in. We're tackling a true giant of literature today, Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Now, on the surface, it's this epic story about a whaling voyage, right? But believe me, it is so much more than that. In this explainer, we're going to walk through the entire incredible story, from a young man's desperate need for adventure all the way to a captain's terrifying spiral into madness. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so to get our arms around this massive story, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the call to the sea, then move into Captain Ahab's vengeance. After that, we'll look at the world on a ship, followed by hunting a phantom, and we'll wrap it all up with the final chase. It's our roadmap for this wild journey.
So let's kick things off. Our story doesn't actually start on a boat. No, it starts in the mind of a guy who's just had enough. He's got what he calls a damp, drizzly November in his soul. You know that feeling? He's completely fed up with life on land and feels this powerful, almost magnetic pull towards the ocean. He's looking for an escape, an adventure, something more.
And this is our narrator, the man we follow through the whole story, Ishmael. And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? He's not just looking for a paycheck. He's got this everlasting itch for things remote. He wants to sail the forbidden seas. I mean, for him, the ocean isn't just a place to work. It's where you go to wrestle with the biggest questions there are.
So this itch, this need for adventure, it leads him straight to Nantucket. And back then, Nantucket was the center of the global whaling industry. It was the place to be. And it's there he meets this incredible character, a Polynesian harpooner named Pequod. They form this really amazing, unlikely friendship that cuts across all their cultural differences. And together, they sign up for a voyage on a whaling ship, a ship with the seriously ominous name, the Pequod.
All right, so the Pequod sets sail, heading out into the open ocean. But something's off. There's this weird feeling on the ship because the captain, a guy named Ahab, is nowhere to be seen. He's just locked away in his cabin. A real sense of dread starts to spread among the crew. I mean, who is this guy and where in the world is he taking them?
And then he finally shows up on deck. And wow, Captain Ahab is just this imposing, intense figure. He's been scarred by the sea, he's got this crazed look in his eye, and he's standing on a peg leg made from the jawbone of a sperm whale. A whale's jawbone. Yeah, this is not a guy who inspires warm, fuzzy feelings. He commands fear. And right away, everyone on that ship knows this is not going to be a normal trip.
And this is the moment everything changes. Ahab gets the whole crew together and he gives this absolutely electrifying speech. It's just full of fire and obsession. And he basically tells them, forget about making money, that's not why we're here. Nope, their one and only mission is his personal, all-consuming revenge against the creature that took his leg and scarred his soul, the legendary white whale, Moby Dick.
And this immediately sets up the central conflict of the whole book. You've got these two totally opposing views. On one hand, you have the first mate, Starbuck. He's a practical, religious guy, and he's horrified. He's like, I signed up to hunt whales for profit, not to chase my captain's personal vendetta. But for Ahab, the white whale isn't just an animal. To him, it's the physical embodiment of all the evil, all the hate, all the stuff that doesn't make sense in the universe.
So you have to wonder, right? Who are these guys who are now trapped on this ship, heading straight into one man's personal hell? Well, the crew of the Pequod is basically a miniature version of the entire world. It's this incredibly diverse group of guys from every corner of the earth, all stuck together on one boat, all being driven by one man's obsession.
And just look at the ship's leadership. It's a perfect example of this diversity. You've got Starbuck, the cautious first mate, Stubb, the happy-go-lucky second mate, and Flask, the aggressive third mate. And each of them is paired with a harpooner from a totally different part of the world. Queequeg, the Polynesian, Tashchego, the Native American, Daegu, the African. Melville has this great line where he calls them isolatists, like they were all separate islands, but now they're federated along one keel. The Pequod is basically a floating United Nations, representing all of humanity.
So how does Ahab get this incredibly diverse crew to buy into his crazy plan? Well, he does it with this intense, almost hypnotic ritual on deck. He gets them all drinking from the same cup, swearing this dramatic oath to join the hunt. And just like that, with his charisma and this powerful ceremony, he turns a simple business trip into a dark, personal crusade. Okay, so as the Pequod gets further and further out into the most remote parts of the ocean, something interesting starts to happen. Moby Dick, the whale they're hunting, stops being just an animal. He becomes something more, a legend, a phantom, a myth that's whispered between sailors on passing ships.
And every time they meet another ship, the legend just grows and grows. They hear these wild stories, that he's everywhere at once, seen in the Atlantic and the Pacific at the same time, that he's immortal, that he survived every harpoon thrown at him, that he's not just smart, but that he has this inscrutable malice. He's not a whale anymore. He's a supernatural force, a literal demon of the seas.
And the voyage itself just gets darker and darker. It's filled with all these terrible omens. At one point, they see a giant squid, which is basically the Kraken, a monster from sailors' nightmares. On top of that, you've got Ahab's weird, shadowy harpooner, Fadala, who keeps making these creepy prophecies about Ahab's death. But Ahab, he's so blinded by his mission, he ignores all of it. In fact, he twists every single warning to make it sound like a promise that he's going to win.
Shall this crazed old man be tamely suffered to drag a whole ship's company down to doom with him? Man, that question's just eating Starbuck alive. He's the voice of reason on this ship, and he's tormented by his captain's madness. He knows this whole quest is suicide. It gets so bad that at one point, he's standing outside Ahab's cabin with a loaded gun, literally debating whether he should commit mutiny to save everyone from what he knows is certain death.
And then, finally, after all this time, after crossing the entire globe, Ahab sees him. A flash of white on the horizon, a spout of water, a hump like a snow hill. It's him. It's Moby Dick. And the final, epic, 3-day chase begins.
Now this isn't just a hunt. This is an all-out war. On day 1, Moby Dick shows up and bam! He completely wrecks Ahab's little whaleboat. Ahab barely escapes. Day 2, the whale is even more aggressive. He smashes up the other boats, and Fadala, the prophet, gets tangled in the lines and dragged to his death. And on day 3, Moby Dick seems to decide he's had enough. He ignores the little boats and turns his attention to the main ship, the Pequod itself, and charges.
Even with his ship literally sinking under him, Ahab just can't let it go. He hurls one last harpoon, screaming at the whale, and in this just perfect, awful moment of irony, the rope from the harpoon whips around his own neck, and he gets yanked out of the boat, pulled to his death, literally tied to the very thing he hates.
And the destruction is absolute. The Pequod, that floating world we talked about, gets rammed by Moby Dick, and it's pulled down into a swirling vortex. Every single man on board, every single one, is dragged down with the ship. It's this final, horrifying image of what happens when one man's obsession goes too far.
And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. What a line. It's from the Bible, from the book of Job. After all that chaos, all that violence, there's just silence, an empty ocean. You think the story is completely over, but no. One person made it out. One person survived to tell the tale. And of course, that survivor is our narrator, Ishmael. He was thrown from a boat during the chaos, and he just floats there, watching the whole thing go down. And then, just as the vortex from the sinking ship is about to close, a coffin shoots up to the surface. It's the coffin his friend Pequod had built for himself earlier in the voyage. And in the ultimate irony, this thing that was meant for death becomes Ishmael's life raft. It keeps him afloat until another ship, by pure chance, finds him.
So, the story ends, but it leaves us with this huge, lingering question, one that people have been debating for over 150 years. What do you think? Was Captain Ahab some kind of hero, a guy who was brave enough to stare into the void and fight back against a cruel, meaningless universe? Or was he just a madman whose own private obsession destroyed him and everyone around him? The book never gives you an easy answer, and that's the point. It leaves you to think about it, to stare into those same depths yourself.